Welcome to the online training for the Integrated Monarch Monitoring Program, or IMMP. The IMMP is a program to collect data on monarch butterflies and their habitats across their entire breeding range. The data will be used by a variety of conservation professionals and researchers to advance our understanding of monarchs and their habitats, set conservation objectives, and monitor progress toward them. We're excited to have you join this effort. In this video, you'll learn about different ways to select a site to monitor and how to register your selected site with the program. In the IMMP overview video, you reviewed the site types, or land use types, that can be sampled with the IMMP. These include protected grasslands, unclassified or unprotected grasslands, agriculture, which may include row crops, pastures, field edges, or lands enrolled in conservation practices, like the Conservation Reserve Program, rights-of-way, and developed open spaces. You may select any of these types to survey. You may also select between random and non-random sites. A random site is recommended for those who can do this. It's a site that has been selected by the IMMP and can be adopted by you. A non-random site is for people who cannot access random sites near them, or who are charged with monitoring certain properties, like the parks they work for, or who have personal properties they strongly prefer to monitor. We recommend monitoring a random site if at all possible, because this helps us more accurately describe the average habitat condition in an area. Your own personal non-random site can help us understand how conservation activities affect monarchs and their habitat if conservation activities are being applied on that property. And also consider adding a random site for comparison if possible. Going through this specialized random selection process is very important to understanding the landscape as a whole. Imagine this purple area is a landscape that a monarch will fly over, and we want to evaluate it. We pick a site that we want to monitor. It's a beautiful park with lots of open habitat and monarchs that we're excited to see. Then we'll pick another site. It's another park. Maybe it's not as nice, but we're doing some management here, and we'll track how the habitat changes. Then we pick another site to monitor. It's our friend Susie's backyard, and another friend's yard. And then Susie starts to monitor at her nature center, because she goes there all the time and she knows there's a lot of milkweed there. A few friends pick out a few more sites, and eventually we have a whole suite of non-random sites that we've chosen to monitor. The habitat's shaping up quite well. Look at all of this that we've surveyed. We found a lot of milkweed and nectar plants, especially given that we've only surveyed about 10% of this purple landscape. So that means maybe there's 10 times more milkweed out here, right? In the purple areas that we haven't monitored? Or maybe not. This is why we strive for a random sampling. This, what you see here, is the landscape that the monarch would encounter. So we need to know what's available to the monarch across the whole landscape, not just in the areas where people are caring for the habitat. First, we'll briefly review how the IMMP random sites were generated and demonstrate how you can view them online and adopt them. If you're monitoring a non-random site, you can fast forward to minute 29. As you may recall from the IMMP overview video, one of the IMMP's biggest strengths is its spatially balanced random sampling design. In order to gather data that are representative of the entire landscape, we must sample across broad geographies and land uses in an unbiased way. That's where random sampling comes in. You may have viewed this map on the IMMP website. This shows randomly selected priority monarch blocks. To get these blocks, we placed a 10 kilometer by 10 kilometer grid across the contiguous U.S. and randomly selected several of those grid cells to target for monitoring. For example, imagine this grid has been laid over an area of land. We used a grid like this to select monarch blocks shown on the previous map. These monarch blocks were numbered in a spatially balanced way, meaning they were spread out to help us select monarch blocks that span the whole area and don't end up being clustered or missing large areas, and yet they're still random. Here you can see the numbers being randomly assigned to cells, while also being spatially distributed across the whole area. A lower number means a higher priority, with 1 being the highest. Then, the lowest numbered Monarch blocks were selected as priority monitoring areas. In this example, blocks 1 through 6 are selected. See how they're relatively spread out? It's okay that some touch each other, like 5 and 6. This is part of the random chance. You may see Monarch blocks very close to each other on the IMMP map, which is also just a part of the random design. What's important is that they're spread out across most of the landscape. Within each priority Monarch block, which is represented here in red, spatially balanced random points were numbered in one way in the Monarch blocks east of the Rocky Mountains, and in a different way for Monarch blocks west of the Rockies. East of the Rockies, the sites are distributed across land use types, as shown here. Each color represents a different land use type, or what's called a site type in the IMMP. Lower numbers indicate a higher priority. Again, this is by random chance. Thus, if you wanted to select the highest priority site in this Monarch block, you would select point number 1. This is a developed open space. But if you only wanted to monitor a specific site type, for example, a right-of-way, you would pick the lowest numbered purple dot, which here is number 7. Ultimately, the IMMP goal is to monitor the lowest number of each site type in each priority Monarch block. That's 5 random sites in every red block that you see on the map. In the west, random points were assigned to the areas that have low, medium, and high suitability for milkweed. Since milkweed distribution is very patchy in this western region, this helps ensure that sites with low, medium, and high chance, per se, of finding monarch habitat are surveyed, even if the high suitability area is quite small, as shown in this example. In the west, we'll start by picking points that fall within the high suitability for milkweed, and then we'll add the other points as we get more participants. Now we'll learn to select and register a random site using the IMMP Site Selection tool. We'll navigate to the website shown here, and then walk through a live example. Navigating to the short link provided in the previous slide, bit.ly/random site selection, will bring you to this map. Then make sure that your screen is fully maximized. There are step-by-step instructions in a document on the IMMP Training Resources page, so you can work through these tools with that document and not always have to pull up this video. In the search bar on the map, type a city, an address, coordinates, or monarch block near your area of interest. Here we'll zoom into Kettering, Ohio. Click off of the box to remove all the white options. It looks like Monarch Block 5627 is near where we want to sample, so let's zoom into that block. You can zoom in by clicking the plus sign on the left here, or by using your mouse's scrolling wheel. You can also drag and drop the map to move it. Once you find a Monarch block that you're interested in, zoom in closer to view the individual points, like we've done here. You can click here on the upper right to see the legend, so you know which colors correspond to which site types. Click to expand the legend, and then click on the arrow next to the site type layer. You can scroll down in here to see all of the colors and all of the site types that they correspond to. The circle around each point shows its adoption status. You can view this by clicking the arrow next to the site status layer. A yellow means that it's available to be adopted. It's available. A blue ring means that it's already been adopted by somebody else. An X means do not monitor, and the reason will be displayed when you click on the point. So we'll close out of this box and we'll zoom out to look at the whole Monarch block we're interested in. First, we want to look for any blue circles to see if any of the sites are already adopted. If they are, it's best to select a different site type than something that's already been adopted. Remember that we want to monitor one of each site type. It might help to turn off all of the colored dots so that just the yellow or the blue rings remain. That's the site status. If you want to see what the colors mean, remember that we can click on this legend here. We can also check or uncheck a box to show or hide that layer. So I'll uncheck the site type box and just show the site status. So we're just looking at the available, adopted, and do not monitor site status. Do you see the blue circle on the north side of this Monarch block? Let's zoom in and click on it to see what site type it is. When we get close, I'll turn my site type back on. I see that it's purple. So it looks like somebody has already adopted a right-of-way in this Monarch block. That means that we should not adopt another right-of-way in this Monarch block. If you're only interested in a right-of-way, for example, then you could find a different Monarch block nearby and adopt a right-of-way there. If there are no blue circles, then you could just search for the lowest numbered site. You can also restrict your search to a certain site type. For example, let's zoom back out. So let's say we're interested in monitoring an unclassified grassland. One way that we can quickly find the highest priority unclassified grassland to monitor is to filter these dots. One way to do that is to click this filter button and filter by site types. Then we'll check the box for View Unclassified Grassland Sites. We're turning those on and everything else is off. So the only sites that are showing are the unclassified grassland ones. The site adoption status will remain. If that bothers you and you want to turn it off, you can uncheck that box in your Layer tab, and then you're left with only the green dots representing unclassified grasslands. Now we'll sort these. To sort these so that the highest priority unclassified grassland is at the top of a list, we'll go down here on your Layers tab, click the three buttons next to the site type in order to open an attribute table. The attribute table is just a list of information about every point. You can see that it's only telling us information about the unclassified grasslands because we set that filter just a moment ago. But it's still showing us unclassified grasslands from all of the blocks all over the nation. So we're going to set one more filter by clicking Options, Filter, and adding an expression. Use the drop-down menu to select the block ID. We want to make sure it is 5627, our Monarch block of interest, and then we click OK. So now we're only seeing the unclassified grasslands in Monarch block 5627. Now let's sort them by clicking on the point ID, sort ascending, the smallest one goes to the top, and to highlight it, we click over here on the left, then click our Zoom to button, it'll take us right there, and here we have our highest priority unclassified grassland site for Monarch block 5627. You can drag this attribute table back down and zoom out to view the area around the site. Now let's turn on our site status layer to make sure that it's actually available for adoption. So I'll go back up here, turn back on our site status. And look, we see a yellow ring around it, so it is available for adoption. Now let's think about this point for a minute. It says that it's an unclassified grassland. Does that make sense? Yes, even though it's right on a wooded edge, we could run our plot southward. and monitor this grassland. You might be thinking, well, that looks like a mowed field. There won't be any milkweed there. That could be boring to monitor. But remember the importance of random site selection. If there really are no Monarch resources here, it's best to verify that with data. There are special instructions in the protocol on how to deal with turf grass habitats, like this might be. In short, you would conduct one visit, collect data once, and then you could go adopt a different site. Or you could get there and realize that this landowner mows once a year to keep it open, and it's really nice habitat the rest of the time. So let's say that we want to adopt this site. Now you can use the site editor to add some of your own information. You can open the site editor by clicking this brown button here. Then it tells you to click on the point that you would like to edit. So we'll click on point 55. Now you can fill in certain information. Using the aerial imagery, examine the location to see if it should not be monitored because it's heavily forested or if it's open water. That type of land cover wouldn't be suitable for monitoring monarch habitat. This program also doesn't monitor sites smaller than 1 hectare or 2.5 acres because the monitoring plots need to be that large. If you find later that it should not be monitored for another reason, such as it's inaccessible or the landowner declines permissions, you can come back in here, click on the site editor, and change it to Do Not Monitor. In our example, it looks like this potential grassland habitat, and it could be monitored. So let's make sure that it's big enough to fit one of our standard plot sizes. We'll click the Measure tool, and you can use the ruler to measure length. You can move this little sidebar out of the way, and we'll make sure that either a 100 or a 200 meter long plot will fit in this grassland. Click your starting point and drag down. Approximately here we reach about 200 meters, so it does look like we can fit a 200 meter by 50 meter plot on this site. I'll double click to end the line, then I can click Clear and close out this box. So now I'm going to change this site status to adopted. Now let's verify our site type. Sometimes the computer mapping program has misidentified what the land cover is, or it's changed since the classifications were made. If you can tell right away that the site type is wrong, you can correct it here. Use the Verified Site Type dropdown to record the correct classification. For example, you might zoom into this unclassified grassland only to find out that it's now agriculture. You could still monitor the site as long as another agriculture one wasn't already adopted in the Monarch block. Just record the correct verified site type. For adopted by, record your full name or your first initial and your last name. Enter the adoption date, and then enter any notes, especially if you deviated from the selection process. For example, if you selected this point because you know the landowner, or you didn't want to travel to a more highly ranked point, write that here. Then make sure to hit Save. Now that you have your site, you should record some information on your site description form. You can print off a site description form and fill it out on paper, or pull up the site description form in Survey 123. Here we've printed off a survey form, and we're going to leave our visit date to be determined for when we go out there and set foot on the site for the first time. We'll fill in our observer name, and then mark the original site type, which was unclassified grassland. We also verified from the aerial imagery that it is an unclassified grassland, so we'll mark that here. We know that the Monarch block number is 5627, so we write that here with leading zeros to make it 6 digits. And then, from our sampling point map, we know that it's point 55. So again, we write that here with leading zeros so there's 6 digits. Now we verified that we're going to fit a standard rectangle on this site. It is 200 meters long, so we can fit the 200 meter by 50 meter standard rectangle. We'll mark that box, and that's the shape that we'll be using every time we monitor. We know the plot coordinates for point 1 because when we click on our sampling point, those coordinates are shown. So we write those down here. This is all the information you would need to take into the field to set up your plot directly in the field. If you're choosing to set up your plot using this map, you can fill in some more information, and we'll show you how to do that shortly. If you want to prepare more ahead of time, you could get the remaining 3 corners of your plot from this map right now, as well as the starting bearing, or the orientation. This could be helpful if you need to share the exact location of the plot with the landowner first, or if you have an irregularly shaped plot, because the size of that plot will determine the spacings of the transects for Activity 1. If you need to do this, you can use the measure tool to place the corners of your plot. We'll click the measure tool. I'll zoom in slightly and use the ruler. Start at your point 1, the original starting point, and drag this in the direction that you want to orient your plot for 200 meters. Click to place the second corner, then turn 90 degrees to the right for 50 meters. Click, and then 200 meters back to the north in the direction that we came from. Click, and you can double click to close out your drawing. For the standard rectangle, we should have an entire 500 meters of length. Now I can get the coordinates of these corners by minimizing this measure tool and going to the lower left. See how these degrees, these coordinates are moving as I move my cursor? I can click on this dot to enable map clicking to get my coordinates. So now wherever I click, coordinates will appear. So on this point 2, my second corner, I can take these digits and write them down on my site description form. Then I can click on my third corner and write these digits down, and do the same thing for my fourth corner. And then I have all the GPS coordinates for all of my corners. In order to get the starting bearing, I use the distance and direction tool, which is this orange dot. Click on it, leave it as the default points up here, check the box that says Create Line Interactively, and then click on this gray push pin. We're going to draw a line along the angle of our first plot boundary. So start at your starting point. We can move this out of the way and drag it along the side. Notice how the length and the angle of this line are changing as I move it. When I click to end the line, it tells me how long and what angle it is. So I know that my starting bearing will be about 183 degrees. I can write this on my site description form as well. Then I have all the information to set up the plot in the field. Again, you do not have to go through these steps using the computer. You can navigate to point 1 and then create your plot on site. Now that you have the locations of all of the corners for your plot, you can record them for point 2, point 3, and point 4 on the sheet here by clicking on the dots as we've shown. You can also record your start bearing, and then you're ready to head to the field. Again, it is not necessary to get points 2, 3, and 4, as well as the starting bearing using the map feature here. You can do all of this in the field. Now let's practice getting the area of an irregular plot. Let's say that this point, 1399, is a point that I want to sample. First, I need to make sure that it's large enough to fit a monitoring plot. We look for sites that are 2.5 acres large. In order to measure that, we click our Measure tool and then click on the Area button. We're going to map the area, the open area that we would survey. Use your mouse to click around the perimeter to see if we can survey at least 2.5 acres. The size is 2.8 acres, which is large enough to monitor. If I want this to be my plot boundary, then I can look at the chart shown momentarily to determine how far apart my transects for activity 1 should be. This is the transect spacing for irregular plots. Our plot was 2.8 acres, so our transects for activity 1 will be 20 meters apart. This is if we're doing activity 1. You see plot sizes that are smaller than 2.5 acres because sometimes a self-selected plot is a little bit smaller. The randomly selected plots should be 2.5 acres minimum. There are many landowner outreach resources available at the monarchjointventure.org/IMMP website. These include scripts that you can use on a phone call or direct site visit, outreach materials that talk about the program, and you can also email monitoring@monarchjointventure.org to be connected to a local monitoring coordinator who might be able to help out with landowner outreach. We'll also review some mapping tools that might help you with landowner outreach as well. If you want to try to contact the landowner ahead of time, one option is to see if the relevant county has shared parcel information on this GIS platform that you're using. Click this icon to search for and add data. Here, we know we're in Montgomery County, Ohio. You can find the county, if you don't already know it, by clicking on the point. So we're going to search for other data from Montgomery County that has parcels. Sometimes you'll have to test a few of these layers that pop up by clicking the Add button. Usually a parcel file is not available, but we do have one for this county. Sometimes you'll have to zoom in even further for it to show up. We can see it at this scale. Click on the relevant parcel, and here we see that the parcel that we would survey is owned by Robert Snyder and others. You could search the county website or a white pages service online for the owner's phone number or other contact information if you wanted to call prior to visiting. In this example, I could drive up to a house or an office over here and ask who I would need to speak to monitor this area. You can also call your local monitoring coordinator or reach out to Monarch Joint Venture using their monitoring@monarchjointventure.org email address to see if there's a local monitoring coordinator near you who can help find contact information. Often, a direct visit to the site is the most effective and efficient way to get permission to monitor. That completes the step-by-step training on how to adopt a random site. Remember, these steps are written out in a document available on the IMMP Training Resources webpage. If you have questions, contact your local monitoring coordinator or the Monarch Joint Venture staff. Now we'll review how to select a non-random site and enter it into the IMMP system. You may select your own site to monitor as long as it's at least 1 acre and is one of the site types mentioned previously. We are especially seeking sites that are site types typically undersurveyed or with limited access. This includes crop fields, field edges, and agricultural conservation lands, where we can track how management activities impact monarchs in these habitats. If you're selecting your own site, Consider also surveying a random location nearby if you have the ability to adopt two. You can select a site within a high-priority Monarch block or a site outside of the block. Both are acceptable. Now we'll review how to adopt the non-random site, such as a conservation project of your own. First, navigate to the website shown here. That short link just shown will take you to this IMMP site map. Make sure that your screen is fully maximized. Then type in an address, a city, a county into the search bar to zoom into your project area. Here, we'll zoom to Madison, Wisconsin, to an area where hypothetically we know a project will be occurring. As you zoom in, you'll see green squares appear. These are all Monarch blocks. You'll need to know which of these blocks your site falls into in order to generate the site ID. Here we'll zoom into 131,506. You can zoom by double-clicking or by using the navigation arrows on the left. We'll zoom into a park. Let's say we know that this dark green area is undergoing a restoration project and we want to monitor it. First, let's see if this site is even large enough to monitor using the IMMP. Use the Measure tool to obtain the area. You can find the Measure tool down here with the ruler. Then click on the Area button and click around your project area. Self-selected sites should be at least 1 acre in size. We have 4.6 acres here, so we're good to monitor. You can clear the drawing we just made by clicking the Clear button, and then close out of the Measure tool. If this were your project, and the project area crossed over a pathway or a similar intrusion, that's okay. Up to 10% of your plot can contain non-habitat areas, like driveways, or patches of trees, or buildings. Just make sure to orient your plot so that those intrusions are minimized where possible. Now let's see if the 200-meter long standard rectangle plot will fit. Again, we'll open our Measure tool, and this time use the distance ruler. If we start our plot here on the corner, do we have 200 meters of length to monitor? No, it really doesn't look like that will fit. So we'll clear that drawing and let's see if we could fit a 100 meter by 100 meter standard square here. We can use this tool to draw approximately where our site boundaries would be. And it looks like we could fit a standard square in this area approximately like this. You don't have to do this online here. You could go straight to your point in the field and use a compass and a Transect tape to figure out how to orient the plot. You can watch the navigation training video to learn more about doing that in the field. Now that we know where at least one of our corners will be, we can register this site. It's time to place your point on the map and adopt it. Let's clear out of these measuring tools, and we'll click the Site Editor tool, here down in the orange. Now it tells us to click the red dot and place the point on the map at our starting point. We'll start over here. The fields in red are required. Write your full name or your first initial and last name. This will only be visible to registered IMMP users who click on this point. Write the Monarch block number, that number from the green square when we first zoomed in. If you need to, you can zoom back out and find that number again. Enter leading zeros if necessary, if your Monarch block ID has fewer than 6 digits. To create your point ID, type the letters SS and then your 3-letter initials. If you don't have a middle name, use X for the middle initial. Then use a 1-digit number. If this is your first point in this block, use the number 1. If you're adopting more than one self-selected site of the same site type in this block, use number 2 or number 3 and so on. Select the appropriate site type and site type code. Here we're looking at a protected parkland in a developed area. This is very much a developed open space. We can get the site type code from the site type drop-down menu that we just selected. This is DEV. Type any notes. Then choose the data sharing level. This is the scale at which the data will be shared with researchers. We recommend using the point level unless the landowner requests otherwise. In this way, data is associated specifically with this site and this point. If they select block level, the data will be associated with the Monarch block number, but not specifically linked to this exact site. For county level, it'll be associated with the county, but not specifically linked to the exact site. Personal information, including owner names, monitoring people's names, or contact information, will never be shared with researchers. Here, we'll select point level data sharing. When you're done, click Save. Now that you have your site, you should record some of this information on your site description form. To get the coordinates for this point, I can use this tool on the lower left. See how the coordinates are moving as I move my cursor around? If I click on this dot to the left, I will enable map clicking to get coordinates, which means that I can take my arrow, click on my point, and then see the coordinates of where my point is. This is the information that I can write on my site description form for point 1. You can choose to print out the site description form on paper or enter the information directly into the Survey 123 app. In this example, we've chosen to print out the form. First, we mark the original site type. This is a developed open space, and we verified it because we know the site. It's in Monarch Block 131506, and the sampling point, which we created, is SSJLT1. We leave the visit date to be determined, and we can fill this out on the first day that we visit the site in the field. The observer name is filled in, and then we mark the plot configuration. This was a standard square as we measured with the mapping tool. We record the point 1 coordinates, which we obtained by registering the site and then clicking on that site. That's enough information to take in the field. We could stop there, go into the field, and set up the standard square and get the remaining coordinates in the field directly. You may also choose to use this mapping tool to get the remaining 3 corners as well as your starting bearing. This could be helpful if you need to share the exact location of the plot with the landowner first, or if you have an irregularly shaped plot, because determining the size will determine the spacing of the transects for Activity 1. If I want to get more point coordinates from more corners of my site, I can use this same tool. First, I'll want to redraw our 100 meter by 100 meter square on here. Double-click to end the drawing. I can minimize the measure tool and then use the same function, clicking on this dot to the lower left, to get map coordinates for my second, my third, and my fourth corners. If I want to know my starting bearing, so the direction that I will walk from my starting point to my second point, I can use this distance and direction tool. Click on this tool. You can drag and drop it out of the way if needed. Leave the default from on points. Click the box to create line interactively, and then click on this small button here. Start your drawing at your first corner by clicking once and then clicking a second time on your second corner. Notice how the length and the angle are changing as I move my line around. When I click to end my line, the length and the angle are confirmed. So I know that my angle, or my starting bearing, is about 226 degrees. I can write this on my site description form. Once you have the coordinates from the mapping tool, you can write them in P2, P3, and P4 spaces and navigate to them directly in the field. You can also record the starting bearing, or the angle, that we got using the mapping tool at 225 degrees. Again, it's not necessary to fill in all of this information using the mapping tool, but can be a useful alternative if you need to know exactly where the plot will be ahead of time. If my monitoring plot is going to be an irregular shape, I should measure the size of it so that I know how far apart to space my transects for activity 1. This is only if I am conducting activity 1. I can find the area by clicking the Measure tool and then the Area button. If I intended to monitor this entire dark green area in this irregular shape, my plot would be approximately 4.4 acres. Then use the table shown momentarily, which is also in the Site Selection Instructions, to determine the transect spacing. This is the transect spacing for irregular plots where activity 1 is conducted. If you're conducting activity 1, place your transects this far apart, depending on your plot size. You will only need to do this for irregular plots. If your plot is a standard square, a standard rectangle, or a linear plot, follow the directions in the IMMP protocol for spacing your transects. That completes the step-by-step training on how to adopt a random or a non-random site. Remember, these steps are written out in a document available on the IMMP Training Resources webpage. If you have questions, contact your local monitoring coordinator or the Monarch joint venture at the email address shown here. Thank you, and happy monitoring.